Gabriella Langley didn't mean to get locked inside a warehouse with a stranger during the worst thunderstorm of the year. She just wanted to drop off her design samples and get out before the rain made her soaked sneakers even heavier. But now her soaked hoodie clung to her skin, her phone was dead, and the massive steel doors behind her had slammed shut with a finality that made her stomach twist. She pounded on them again, uselessly. "Hello?" she called into the dark, cavernous space. "Anyone here?" "Yeah," came a voice from the shadows, deep and annoyed. "Over here." Gabriella turned, blinking as her eyes adjusted. A man stepped out from behind a tall stack of crates. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed like he didn't belong anywhere near a warehouse. Black dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, no tie but definitely expensive shoes. His hair was damp from the storm, and something about his stillness made her throat dry. "I didn't realize anyone else was here," she said, brushing her wet hair out of her face. "Clearly," he muttered, dragging a hand through his dark hair. "You tripped the security lock when you came in. Doors won't open until power resets. That could take hours." She stared at him. "Wait, I'm stuck here? With you? Looks like it." She sighed and dropped onto a low stack of cardboard boxes. "Great. Just great." He didn't say anything. Just watched her for a beat before walking toward the far end of the warehouse and grabbing a lantern from a shelf. With a flick, soft yellow light glowed between them. "I'm Gabriella," she offered, trying to shake off the awkward tension. "York." He didn't offer a last name, just walked past her and set the lantern on a crate. "You work for the design firm?" She nodded. "Yeah. I'm a textile artist. I was just dropping off samples for one of your clients. I didn't think anyone would be here this late." He paused. "You were supposed to drop them off at the main office. I was told to bring them here." She wrinkled her nose. "Warehouse 4. That's this one," he said, then narrowed his eyes. "You were sent here by mistake." She folded her arms. "Well, I'm still here. And unless you've got a secret exit, I guess we're stuck together. So maybe don't act like I broke into your man cave." That drew the smallest twitch of his lips. "Fair enough." Thunder cracked so loud the boxes around them trembled. Gabriella flinched, pulling her knees up onto the box. "You scared of storms?" York asked, voice quieter now. She hesitated. "I just don't like being alone in them." "You're not alone." He moved to the side and sat down on a nearby crate, facing her. "So, textile artist?" "Yeah," she said, grateful for the change in topic. "I make sustainable fabrics for fashion houses. Mostly custom orders. It's not glamorous, but I love it." He tilted his head. "Not glamorous? You create things from nothing. That's more than most people can say." She blinked at him. "That's actually kind of nice. Don't let it go to your head." Gabriella laughed, a small, surprised sound. "Too late." They sat in silence for a few minutes, the lantern casting long shadows as rain hammered the warehouse roof. She watched him from the corner of her eye. He didn't fidget, didn't check a watch, just sat there like he wasn't in a hurry to be anywhere. But something about him felt tightly wound, like he was used to controlling every second of his day. "You don't seem like a warehouse kind of guy," she said finally. He glanced over. "What does that mean?" "You look like you belong behind a desk in a corner office, not here." "I do," he said simply. "I was checking on a shipment. Personally." Gabriella raised a brow. "You're the manager or something?" He hesitated. "Something like that." She didn't push, but something about the way he said it made her curious. As the storm raged on, they talked. About little things, her childhood in a tiny Ohio town, his frustration with how people waste time in meetings, the weirdest fabric she ever dyed, banana fiber, and how he hated champagne but drank it anyway at corporate events. She liked the way he listened. Not just nodded politely, but really listened. And there was something about his voice, low, steady, with just enough sarcasm to make her laugh even when her jeans were damp and her teeth were chattering. When a loud boom made the entire building rattle, she jumped hard. York stood and crossed the space between them in 2 strides. "You okay?" he asked, his voice suddenly serious. "Yeah," she said, embarrassed. "Just loud." He hesitated, then pulled off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was warm, smelled like cedar and something expensive. "Thanks," she murmured. He looked at her for a moment longer than necessary. "You're welcome." The thunder faded into a distant rumble. Eventually, the lights flickered and buzzed to life, and the giant doors groaned open an inch. York stood, brushing off his shirt. "Looks like we're free." Gabriella hesitated. "Do I get to know your last name before I go?" He looked at her, amused. "Hale." She froze. "Wait. York Hale," she repeated. "As in, Hale Industries?" He gave a small nod, watching her reaction. "You're the CEO?" "I am." She stared at him, completely thrown. "I just spent 2 hours teasing a billionaire in a warehouse." He smiled. "And you didn't ask for a single favor. That's rare." She stood, pulling his jacket tighter around her. "You gonna fire me for trespassing?" "I should," he said, then added, "but I won't." They stood facing each other as wind whipped through the now open doors. "Thanks for not making it weird," she said, her voice quieter. "I could say the same," he replied, his eyes locked on hers. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Finally, Gabriella stepped back. "Well, guess I'll see you." "Never." His gaze didn't waver. "Don't count on that." She didn't know what he meant by that, but the look in his eyes made her stomach flip. As she walked out into the clearing storm, Gabriella didn't look back. But York Hale watched her the entire way. Gabriella didn't expect to see him again. People like York Hale existed in a different orbit, one of private jets, boardrooms, and names printed in glossy magazines. Her life was fabric dye, late invoices, and a second-hand sewing machine that rattled when it ran too long. But then, 3 days later, she walked into the design firm's midtown office for a client meeting and froze. York Hale stood in the glass conference room facing the skyline with a phone to his ear. He wore a slate gray suit tailored to perfection. Not a wrinkle in sight, not a strand of hair out of place. He ended his call, turned and saw her. She tried to move past without acknowledging him, but his voice stopped her. "Gabriella." She exhaled quietly and turned. "Mr. Hale." He stepped out of the conference room, ignoring the way the assistants along the hallway subtly straightened as he passed. "You're meeting with the Carmichael team?" "I am," she said carefully. "I thought the CEO of Hale Industries had more pressing things to do than micromanage fabric consultations. I'm investing in the Carmichael relaunch. I take an interest in where my money goes." She adjusted the strap of her portfolio. "Then I hope my work makes the right impression." He didn't respond immediately. Then, "It already has." The door to the meeting room opened, and one of the stylists waved her in. Gabriella gave York a small nod and stepped past him. Her heart pounded louder than it should have. The meeting dragged. They reviewed swatches, discussed color stories, argued about lead times. But every now and then, Gabriella caught York's reflection in the glass walls, still outside, still watching. Afterward, she packed her things and headed toward the elevators. She didn't hear him approach until he was beside her. "You're not going to ask why I stayed? I assume you had nothing better to do," she said, pressing the button. "I had 3 meetings scheduled. I canceled them." She looked at him then. "Why?" "I wanted to see how you work." The elevator opened. She stepped in. He followed. "Are you always this cryptic with people?" she asked as the doors closed and the car began to descend. "No. Most of them don't interest me." She turned her head. "And I do." "Yes." The word landed too easily. Too certain. She crossed her arms. "Just so we're clear, I'm not looking for a patron. Or a sponsor. Or whatever it is powerful men offer women when they want to feel charitable. I'm not offering charity." "Then what are you offering?" He turned to her. "Lunch." "Excuse me. I have a reservation at Aurelia and I'd prefer not to eat alone." She stared at him. "You do realize you could have any woman in this building say yes to that. Probably half on this floor alone." "I didn't ask them." "I asked you." The elevator dinged. The lobby spread out before them, gleaming and full of people who didn't know they were witnessing a moment that had shifted into something else. "I'm not dressed for Aurelia," she said. His gaze flicked down. "You'll be the best-dressed person there." She stepped out of the elevator. He waited. "Fine," she said. "But I'm ordering the truffle risotto." He didn't smile, but something in his expression shifted. "Good." "It's their best dish." They walked out together. A black town car waited at the curb, the door already open. Gabriella hesitated. I usually take the train. There's bottled water and heated seats. She slid in. Inside the restaurant, the maitre d' greeted York by name and escorted them to a private table overlooking the terrace. No menus were presented. The food arrived minutes later, as if the kitchen had been waiting. Gabriella took a bite of the risotto and closed her eyes. Okay, this is ridiculous. He sipped from his glass. In a good way? In a I can't believe I'm eating this with someone who probably owns half the art on the walls way. I only own the sculpture in the front. She set her fork down. Why me? He didn't look away. Because you didn't care who I was. You spoke to me like I was a person, not a bank balance. She leaned back. And that's enough for you to rearrange your day, cancel meetings, and orchestrate a meal like this? It's enough to make me want to know more. She didn't expect the intensity in his voice. It wasn't playful. It wasn't charming. It was honest. She picked up her water glass. I work out of a converted laundromat in Queens. My studio roof leaks and my neighbor plays the saxophone at sunrise. Sounds more interesting than my penthouse. I doubt that. He leaned forward slightly. Then let me show you. She didn't answer. After lunch, the car took them back toward Midtown. Before she got out, he reached into the center console and handed her a business card. I'll be at the Fall Gala next week. You should come. I don't have a ticket. You do now. She took the card but didn't promise anything. Back at her studio, Gabriella leaned against the door and stared at the ceiling. The storm had passed days ago, but something else had started brewing the moment she got locked in that warehouse. And now, the man with the most power in her industry had zeroed in on her like she was the only thing he wanted. She didn't know what to make of that, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't invisible anymore. Gabriella stood in front of the mirror in her studio holding up the invitation York had given her. The Fall Gala. An exclusive industry event where fashion magnates and media giants circled each other like planets in a glimmering solar system. She'd never been invited before, never even considered going. People like her didn't get noticed. But now her name was on the guest list. And she had nothing to wear. She glanced around the studio, bolts of eco-dyed silk, test prints, scraps pinned to mannequins, none of it gala-ready. At least, not for her. Her clients got the finished products. She lived in the in-between. A knock sounded at the door. Not the buzz from the front of the building. Someone was already inside the hallway. She opened it cautiously and blinked. A woman in a sleek black pantsuit stood holding a long garment bag and a white envelope. "Delivery for Ms. Langley," the woman said crisply. "From Mr. Hale." Gabriella hesitated. "I didn't order anything. I was instructed to tell you the dress is custom, and that there's a driver on standby for Thursday evening. I haven't accepted the invitation yet." The woman gave a polite nod. "He said you'd say that." Gabriella took the bag. The woman handed her the envelope and walked away without waiting for a response. Inside was a note, written in clean, deliberate handwriting. "Since you refused to ask for favors, I took the liberty of sending one. Consider it a thank you for the risotto." Gabriella ran her fingers along the smooth fabric inside the bag. Deep sapphire. Simple lines. No branding, no tag. Just elegant and clearly custom-fitted. A small card was tucked into the lining, designed in collaboration with Atelier Marceau. Her breath caught. It was one of the most exclusive ateliers in Paris. No one outside of royalty or red carpet circles wore their pieces. Thursday arrived faster than she expected. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. Not her landlord, who occasionally asked her to sew buttons on his shirts. Not her college friend who once dragged her to a flea market in the rain. No one would understand. The car arrived at exactly 6:30. York hadn't texted. He hadn't followed up. But somehow she knew he'd be there. The gala was held at a private venue near Central Park, with iron gates and a long driveway lined with flickering lanterns. The building itself looked more like a marble palace than an event space. The driver opened her door and flashes went off immediately. Paparazzi stationed at the edge of the entrance, mistaking her for someone important. She kept her head high. Inside, the space glittered with crystal chandeliers and gold-accented columns. Champagne flowed like water, and the air buzzed with ambition. She spotted York across the room before he saw her. He stood near the long bar, speaking with a man in a navy tuxedo with a drink in one hand. He was dressed in black, crisp and understated, but he still drew attention. A pair of executives stood nearby, clearly waiting for a moment to speak with him. He looked up and caught her eye. Everything else fell away. He crossed the floor without a word, stopping in front of her like the room didn't exist. "You came," he said quietly. "You were right about the dress," she replied, adjusting the train slightly. "I'm always right about fabric." She tilted her head. "Is this how you usually greet your guests? With couture and a car?" "No," he said, voice steady. "This is how I greet you." She blinked. "You really don't do subtle, do you? Would subtle have gotten you here?" A waiter passed with a tray of champagne. York took 2 flutes, handed her one. "Walk with me," he said. They moved through the crowd, down a quieter hallway that led to a glass terrace overlooking the city skyline. The air was cooler out here, but not cold. The buzz of Manhattan life below sounded like a distant hum. She took a sip of champagne. "You didn't bring me here just to impress me." "No," he said. "I brought you here because I wanted you to see the world I live in. And decide for yourself if it's something you want to step into." She turned to face him. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're fearless when you think no one's watching. I know you don't flatter people to get ahead. I know you create things that matter to you, even if no one else notices." She swallowed. "You make it sound like I'm some kind of revelation." "You are." She looked away. "This world, it's not mine. It could be. I don't want to be someone's project." "You're not." He stepped closer. "You're the first person who's made me question if building empires is enough." The words stunned her into silence. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small case. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a pendant, a single, raw-cut sapphire, suspended on a delicate platinum chain. "I had this made the morning after the warehouse," he said. "I didn't know why at the time. I just knew I didn't want to forget the way you looked when you gave me hell for being cryptic." She stared at the stone. "You don't even know if I like jewelry. I know you don't wear it to show off. But I thought maybe you'd wear this, if it meant something." She closed the case gently and looked up at him. "This is a lot. I don't do halfway, Gabriella. I can tell." They stood there, city lights flickering around them, the pulse of something heavier than attraction building in the quiet between their words. "I'm not good at this," she said finally. "I don't know how to play these games. I'm not asking you to play. I'm asking you to be exactly who you were in that warehouse. Because that's the person I haven't stopped thinking about." She didn't answer. Not yet. But she didn't walk away either. And that, for now, was enough. Gabriella hadn't planned to see York again after the gala. At least, that's what she told herself every time his name lit up her phone. She didn't answer those calls, not right away. Not because she didn't want to, but because everything about him made her feel like she was standing at the edge of something she couldn't afford to fall into. Then, on a rainy Tuesday, her studio door opened. York stood just inside, umbrella dripping at his side, hair damp from the walk-up. No driver, no assistant, just him. "You didn't call back," he said, voice low. Gabriella set her shears down and wiped her hands on the edge of her apron. "I needed space to think." "Did you?" "Yes. I gave it," he said. "Now I want answers." She crossed her arms. "You don't get to demand things." "I'm not demanding. I'm asking." She glanced behind him at the open door. "You walked here. I know what the subway is. And I didn't want to show up in a car you'd think was trying to impress you." She looked at him for a long moment. "You're too used to getting what you want. And you're too used to pushing people away before they can offer something real." His words landed harder than she expected. He stepped farther in, gaze sweeping the room. "Why didn't you call?" "Because I don't know how to fit into your world. I didn't ask you to. You invited me to it. You bought me a dress that probably cost more than my rent for the year. You had a necklace made after knowing me for 2 hours. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's not normal. I'm not normal, Gabriella. And neither are you. She leaned against the edge of her work table. You think this is romantic, but I've worked too hard to build something for myself. I'm not going to be someone's beautiful distraction. You're not a distraction, York said. You're what I think about when I'm supposed to be solving mergers. She blinked, caught off guard. I've been in rooms with presidents. I've closed deals worth billions. But none of that felt like anything until you looked at me in that warehouse and told me I wasn't special. I never said that. You didn't have to. She walked past him, flipping off the hot plate she'd used to set dye earlier. You don't get it. I can't fall into some fairy tale and lose myself in it. I've seen what happens when you rely on someone else to keep you standing. Then don't rely on me, he said. Walk beside me. She turned slowly. That sounds nice. But what happens when I can't keep up? He stepped closer. Then I'll slow down. Gabriella didn't answer. Her walls were sturdy, built brick by brick over years of disappointment and quiet sacrifices. But York didn't try to climb them. He simply stood there, waiting, like he believed she might lower them on her own. Finally, she moved to the corner of the studio and pulled open a fabric drawer. From it, she removed a swatch of deep indigo silk, faintly textured with a storm-like pattern. She held it out. This was the color of the sky the night we got stuck. He took it from her, running his fingers over the weave. I started dyeing it the next day, she said. I didn't know why. Just needed to. I did the same thing with that pendant. She looked at him. What do you want from me, really? Time, he said. A chance to see what this could be without the world watching. Without expectations. Just you and me. And maybe a faulty warehouse door or two. That made her laugh. Soft, real? He offered her the swatch back, but she didn't take it. Keep it, she said. You're the reason it exists. He tucked it into his coat pocket. She walked to the window and stared out at the street below. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, the kind that made the pavement shine like glass. If I say yes, she said without turning, I need you to understand something. I'm listening. I can't be someone who's only part of your life in the quiet moments. I don't disappear when the lights come back on. He moved beside her. Then I'll keep the lights off. She turned to him. That's not the answer. He nodded. Then I'll make sure they're always shining on you. She didn't reply. Instead, she reached for his hand. It was warm. Solid. She hadn't realized how much she missed steady things. You're not what I expected, she said. Neither are you. They stood there for a long moment, not speaking. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of understanding, of something beginning. Weeks passed, but the momentum didn't fade. York didn't vanish into boardrooms, and Gabriella didn't retreat into solitude. He came to her shows unannounced but never uninvited. She met him at rooftop dinners he planned himself, always in places that didn't ask her to change who she was. He gave her space but never distance. One morning, she arrived at her studio to find a new bolt of fabric on her table, woven with threads of midnight and steel gray. The texture unlike anything she'd ever worked with. A note was pinned to the edge. Commissioned in Milan. Thought it matched the storm. She stared at it for a long time. Then she began to cut. Months later, her designs walked the runway for the first time under her own name. As the final model disappeared behind the curtain, the crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Editors whispered. But all Gabriella saw was York, standing in the back row. Not in a reserved seat. Not in a spotlight. Just watching her. With the same quiet intensity he had that first night when thunder cracked and the world had gone dark. Later, standing outside beneath a canopy of fairy lights at the after-party he hosted in her honor, he reached into his coat and pulled out the swatch she'd given him. I've had this in every country I've been to since that night, he said. Why? To remind myself what matters. She touched the edge of the fabric. You could have had anyone. I didn't want anyone. I wanted the woman who made me feel human in a building full of steel. She looked at him. Then I guess you're stuck with me. He leaned down, his lips brushing hers with a certainty that felt earned. I've been stuck with you since the storm, he whispered. And this time she didn't walk away. The morning sun spilled through the high windows of the converted showroom, flooding the newly opened Langley atelier with golden light. Gabriella stood barefoot on the polished concrete floor, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, surveying the racks of her latest collection. Each piece shimmered with quiet power. Her signature storm-dyed silks and layered textures now carried the weight of a name that meant something. Behind her, the double doors opened with a soft click. "Didn't think you'd be up this early," York said as he stepped inside, sleeves pushed up, no tie, but still somehow more composed than anyone had a right to be at 8 in the morning. "I never really slept," Gabriella replied, turning to face him. "Every time I closed my eyes, I kept thinking I forgot something. A zipper, a seam, a stitch." "You didn't," he said, walking over to her. "It's perfect. You're ready." She arched a brow. "You've seen the collection?" "I saw it last night, after you fell asleep on the couch with a pin cushion stuck to your sweater." She laughed under her breath. "You could have told me. I liked watching you dream. You talk in your sleep, by the way." Gabriella set her mug down on the steel work table. "This is the first time in my life I've had something that's completely mine. No compromises. No shortcuts." "I know," York said quietly. "And I've never been more proud of anything than I am of watching you build this." She walked over to him and rested her hands against his chest. "I thought I'd lose myself in you, that I'd become a piece of someone else's life. But you were the first person who ever wanted to fit into mine. I didn't want to change you, Gabriella. I just wanted to stand close enough to feel the heat." He dipped his head and kissed her, slow and certain, like they had all the time in the world now. And maybe they did. When they pulled apart, she tucked her head against his shoulder. "The press will be here in 2 hours. Buyers in 3. And my mother just left me a voicemail warning me not to let anyone call me a creative genius because it'll go to my head." York grinned. "I assume that's hereditary." She glanced up. "Are you ready for this? The chaos, the interviews, the fact that I told the catering team to serve saffron popcorn instead of canapes. I've built billion-dollar tech companies, negotiated with governments, and survived 5 Davos summits. I can handle popcorn." Gabriella stepped back and picked up a small velvet box from the corner of her desk. "I was saving this for after the launch," she said. "But I changed my mind." She handed it to him. Inside was a pair of silver cufflinks shaped like storm clouds, tiny lightning bolts etched in gold across the surface. He turned them over in his hands. "You made these." "I had them cast from the original swatch," she said. "The one I gave you. I thought maybe you'd wear them when you sign the partnership papers this afternoon." He looked at her, something rare and reverent in his eyes. "You kept the swatch?" "I couldn't let it go completely. But I'm ready to share it now." York reached into his coat and pulled out a slim envelope. "Then I guess now's a good time to give you this." She opened it slowly. Inside was a legal document, a formal agreement transferring ownership of a historic textile mill in the Hudson Valley. Her name was on the deed. Gabriella stared at it. "Is this a joke?" "It's your new production facility," York said. "Fully solar-powered. You won't need to outsource ever again. And the top floor has a skylight studio. I thought you might use it for experimental dye work." Her throat tightened. "This is... I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he said. "Just keep being the woman who turned a storm into silk." She folded the paper carefully and set it down on the table. "I love you." It was the first time either of them had said it aloud. York stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her, holding her there like he'd been waiting his whole life to hear those words. "I've loved you since you told me off in a damp warehouse," he said against her hair. "And I'll keep loving you through every runway, every sleepless night, and every popcorn disaster you throw at me." "Good," she whispered, "because I'm not going anywhere." Later that day, as the cameras clicked and the media swarmed, Gabriella stood beside York with her fingers laced through his. She didn't flinch when the questions came. She didn't hide behind him. She stood tall. The final model stepped onto the runway in a gown of starlight gray, the hem trailing behind her like fog across water. The crowd erupted in applause. Gabriella turned to York. "You ready to take a bow? I'm not the one who deserves it." "Too bad," she said, tugging him forward. "We do this together." He followed her to the edge of the platform and they stepped out hand in hand. The room stood to its feet. A month later, they moved into the Hudson studio. York still kept his downtown office, but he spent more time in Gabriella's world than his own now. He learned the names of her dye suppliers, helped her build shelving, and got scolded for touching fabrics with ink on his fingers. He never complained. One late afternoon, under the skylight of the new atelier, Gabriella stood barefoot in a puddle of indigo, laughing as York tried to help her mix a new pigment. "This is not your color," she teased, looking at the blue streak across his cheek. "Then help me wash it off," he said, pulling her closer. She kissed him instead. Their life wasn't perfect. It wasn't quiet, but it was theirs. And every storm that had once threatened to pull her under now lived in silk and memory, woven into the fabric of a love that neither of them had seen coming but both had chosen, fiercely, again and again. Forever wasn't a fairy tale. It was a warehouse door slamming shut, a storm outside, and someone who stayed anyway.